Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to join you today for the virtual conference of the Society of North American Scholars. I am honored to join you. I wish to express my thanks to Dr. Zeynep Isaac Erkan from Rowan University for asking me to speak with you today. I met her, and it was such a pleasure, at Harvard when I gave a seminar and she was in the audience. I was very happy to hear from her when she extended me the invitation to deliver the keynote address this afternoon for your conference. She was a star of the program. Everyone liked her. She was interactive with all her colleagues. She had big ideas and a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of commitment to Rowan University as well as to her students. So today, we're all gathered here from institutions across the country and perhaps even around the world. Yet, we could have imagined something like this. We could never have imagined something like this, a virtual conference, as recently as 5 years ago. Who came up with the idea to meet people, each other, and hear each other without ever having to leave their offices or even their homes? 2.5 years ago, most people never heard of Zoom. I certainly hadn't. But now, Zoom has become a part of my life. So has Teams, so has so many other virtual platforms. We've become accustomed to it. We don't know how we ever got along without it, but we know that it fills a void right now. And this is an important way that we're meeting, and I'm glad that I'm able to meet with you, even if it's virtually. All my life as a little girl, I was curious about new things, and I always wanted to know how things were created. I always used to ask people around me, and how do people think of new ideas, I used to think, because I don't have new ideas, and I used to think, how do they get these new ideas? How does a person think of something that has never existed before? New things that no one has ever heard of. Think about it. How does a person look up in the sky and say, I wish I could fly, and then develop a mechanism to fly a plane? How does a person look at the ocean and submerge his mind or her mind into it and say, we can go into the depths of the ocean and then design a submarine? How does anyone come up with an idea that has never been thought of before? There are things as simple as a paper clip, or the pen that writes upside down, which is fun, or the adjustable shelf that my laptop sits on, or for that matter, my laptop itself. How did people think about these things and invent them? All of these are examples of items that never existed not long ago, or not even imagined. Less than 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a smartphone, except maybe in a comic book or in some movie that was futuristic, and yet today they have become indispensable to all of us. Someone had thought of combining a phone with a camera and a computer all into one device, and therefore you got the smartphone. And besides doing all that, they let it fit in our pocket. Just saying it out loud, sounds crazy. I can't imagine the person who went up to his or her supervisor and described the smartphone to them. I imagine the supervisor was either very, very generous in his or her response or really believed that the idea could take hold. But today, we cannot be without our portable electronic devices because someone had the idea to invent them from scratch. It's still a marvel that we landed men on the moon. And I remembered when President Kennedy gave a speech and talked about making a manned lunar landing a national priority. I was very young then, and I couldn't imagine people actually putting their feet on the moon. And it happened. Think of all the hundreds, the thousands of people who came together, each with their own responsibilities and their own challenges, solving problems never even considered before. It was an amazing feat. Yet it all came together the way it was supposed to be, and it had to, for our astronauts had to land safely on the moon and return to Earth. The stakes were very, very high, and man accomplished all of it. Things like a paper clip and a smartphone and a moon landing are so much more a part of our lives today, and we take them for granted. These things just never existed, but now they do. But they all have at least one thing in common. Each began with someone's idea, a single thought that had never been thought before. My own sense of curiosity is what has led me to ask questions and to think about new ideas and new ways of working and new ways of thinking and new ways of being. And it's also what has drawn me to the book that I've been reading. I just actually completed it. It was a wonderful book entitled The General and the Genius. I had always been fascinated by the creation of the atomic bomb. And that was because it was created out of nothing. And of course, it took a lot of people to create the atomic bomb during the worst time for our country, which was World War II, when we were fighting the Germans and then the Japanese. The book is by James Connecticut, and he chronicles the relationship between two brilliant men, the Brigadier General Leslie Groves, who represented the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and Robert Oppenheimer. He was a physics professor at the University of California, Berkeley. You would think they would never get along because they came from such different backgrounds. Oppenheimer came from a very wealthy background, and Groves came from a modest blue-collar background. They were both very well educated, and they had very different styles. Oppenheimer was very laid back. He was an academic, a professor, while Groves was a very controlled, very formal person because he was in the military. Groves had been placed in charge of the Manhattan Project and was tasked with developing the atom bomb before the Germans could do it first. So it was an arms race, basically. And there was a lot of pressure on Groves to get the scientists to go to the place where they would develop the bomb. So they began recruiting hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, building houses, building housing, building bridges for them to get there, schools for the families, apartments for the families, houses in some cases, offices, laboratories. All of that Groves did with the Army Corps of Engineers, and Oppenheimer then led the scientists. And he had chemists, he had biologists, he had neurophysicists, he had all kinds of people recruited to that site where they thought that they would develop the atom bomb together. There were moments where they gave up, they didn't think that they could do it, but then there were other moments where they pulled together and slowly but surely each came up with an idea that when it was laid on top of the other, it advanced their progress. Groves was the tough one, a no-nonsense taskmaster who earned his reputation by building the Pentagon both ahead of schedule and under budget, so they knew he was the right man for this project. Oppenheimer was a chain-smoking, martini-drinking, very, very wealthy son of German and American Jewish family who grew up in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. But through his leadership skills, commitment to the project's success, and his scientific mind, and the mutual respect they had for each other, they built a united team. It was told that once Groves came into a meeting that Oppenheimer was chairing and addressed the group. It was a very large meeting of hundreds of people. And Groves was not pleasant in the meeting, and he chastised the people in the room for not moving the project along faster. And when he left, people started to criticize Groves. And Oppenheimer said, to his credit, he's just doing his job. He's just showing who he is, and he's showing that this is his job to tell us that we should be on time. The hallmark of their relationship was that they respected each other. Oppenheimer never undermined Groves, and Groves never undermined Oppenheimer. He knew he was a great scientist with a brilliant mind and that he could lead the scientists. That was critical in the team that they built, that the two leaders had mutual respect for each other and admiration. We all have our own personal feelings about the creation of the atomic bomb, and my intent today is not to draw attention to this particular book, and it's not to debate the merits of what happened at the Manhattan Project and what it ultimately achieved, because we know it was awful. I only am focusing on the creativity of the human mind. The point I want to emphasize in my own remarks today, rather than focus on how the power of leadership and the power of team can impact organizational missions, especially when every individual is united in fulfilling that mission. I believe that fully to the bottom of my soul. If you have the right team of people and they respect each other and you both sides believe in the same, or all sides rather, believe in the same goal, the mission of the institution that you participate in and the goals associated with that mission, you will achieve them. When employed in our own institutions, these winning elements can help us build a more diverse and a more equitable campus. So, fission, metals, guns, implosion, uranium, detonation, the speed of motion, and on and on and on. We're all represented areas of scholarship by different scientists. Yet, every single scientist did his best to participate in the development of the bomb because they wanted the war to end and they wanted our soldiers to come home. Their goal was the American democracy. They wanted to protect the American democracy, and they all fought together for that goal. Even though they came from the different backgrounds and different areas of study, they all gave their best thinking to achieve that one goal. So, with that as a backdrop, and the way that I think about things in terms of teams and goals, I arrived at Eastern in 2006. Almost 17 years ago. The university had many strengths. It was a beautiful community, such as a beautiful campus, several new buildings, and an official designation that Eastern was Connecticut's public liberal arts university. And that was given by the state legislature. I also knew there were areas in which attention was needed. We needed to strengthen academic rigor and improve town-gown relationships, which were really, really bad. But it was a routine review of results of the National Survey of Student Engagement, the NSSE survey. Many of you as scholars know about the NSSE survey. It's given to freshmen and seniors, and you collect data, the students answer the questions, and then you see how they feel about things and how they're thinking about things. Well, I first read the report from the NSSE data, and it was prior to the end of my first year as president. And the data identified very, very significant problems at Eastern. And the reason I paid attention was this was the opinion of the students, not the opinion of an administrator or a faculty member. It was what the students were telling us was wrong with Eastern. As viewed by our newest graduates, our academic support services were simply not good. Academic advising was inconsistent, tutoring was sporadic, if available at all, and supplemental instruction was almost non-existent. And in the few instances in which academic support was available, students didn't know how to access it, as services were scattered among various offices all over the campus. It simply wasn't accomplishing that which it was created to achieve, that being to meet the academic, developmental, and remedial needs of the students at the college. Almost immediately, I assembled a team comprised of Vice President for Academic Affairs, the academic deans, faculty representatives, and key stakeholders from the library and the administrative support staff. Their charge was to identify new models for providing academic support that would be comprehensive, adaptable, and perhaps most importantly, accessible to all students. And thus, the team was assembled with a charge and with a vision, an idea that we could actually be the #1 in the state to improve these services and serve the students in ways that nobody had imagined. Their work yielded an entirely new structure that was launched in 2009 that addressed academic support from multiple sides. It was actually relocated into the library and named Academic Success Center, and for short, we called it the Ask Center. It was established there and created a one-stop shopping location for students in need of academic support and advisement. We included also tutoring services. They were expanded to include all academic subjects across multiple academic disciplines and majors. No longer would students be seeking help with business database management, microeconomics, cell biology, or behavioral science statistics. Would they be turned down because we didn't have tutors available or we didn't have anybody that could help them? That stopped once this was created. All of you know what supplemental instruction is. That's when you reteach the content of a course. And all of us in our universities have what we call killer courses. Killer courses are the courses where most of the students or many of the students fail. And the weaker students usually fail. And the professor moves very quickly, usually through the course, and pays less attention to people who fall behind. So supplemental instruction at Eastern took a serious role when we identified the killer courses that were the highest attrition rates, and then retaught the content of those courses in the Ask Center, an advising center that assisted students with the selection of an academic major, as well as course selection was added. Now there was a consistent support for students selecting a major for the first time. There was advisement, there was tutoring, there was supplemental instruction. Supplemental instruction was critical because in those complex courses where the failure rate was high, we retaught all the material in the Ask Center. There was consistent support for students selecting a major for the first time, and they were very, very much supported in doing so. Those who were looking for new majors went there again if they wanted to change it. There was consistent help available that would enable students to make informed decisions about the academic program that was the best fit for them, as well as the cost of making the change. The advising center was later expanded to include finish in 4, that is, graduate in 4 years. Up until that point, people were taking 5 and 6 years to graduate, so there was a new mantra laid on top of the Ask Center: finish in 4, and everybody was so proud that they were part of the movement to finish in 4 years. It was a program in which incoming students would meet with an academic advisor and immediately map out their academic plan that would let them graduate in 4 years. We had targeted advising cohorts. We called them the TAC cohorts, and they were created to monitor the students. A student was placed in one of 4 cohorts, depending on the variables that we developed in an algorithm, and that showed how vulnerable you were to dropping out or being at risk. We also monitored very closely students who were identified at risk, and we served a early warning system to the students so that they could receive extra support while they still had time to improve their standing. Implementing all of what I've just said and engaging more non-teaching staff also brought about the most important thing, and that was a culture change. The culture change meant that the focus of the university became the student, and having students achieve became the goal of the university. While Eastern's Division of Students Affairs had long been known for students first, they had a wonderful approach with students. Faculty and staff engaged in academic support also began to embrace a similar view. So there was a shift, as I said, in the culture. Instead of creating barriers that would discourage academically at-risk students, faculty and staff began to ask, what are the existing barriers to student success, and what can be done to minimize and remove them? That was a critical question that they asked themselves in meetings and in committee structures that they set up. This new outlook served Eastern and our students well in what was to come. So now that I have this structure and I'm president, I have a wonderful team in place that actually delivers a structure that's working. The next thing I thought about was we have these wonderful admission standards, almost like UConn, as high as UConn. And as president, I was very, very proud of those admission standards because I wanted to be very competitive in U.S. News and World Report. Today, we rank in the top 20 in the North. The North goes from Maryland all the way to Canada across to Pennsylvania. So for us to rank in the top 20, we're number 19, is huge. So I knew that those admission standards would give me as president the opportunity to develop a strong academic reputation for Eastern. But then as a woman of color and coming from a very poor background, I began to think about all the students that we were not accepting, all the students who were there in the cities and who were battling against everyday unthinkable challenges. They didn't have enough to eat. There were guns being fired in their neighborhoods. They lived 12 in an apartment if they were an immigrant. Some of the women were being molested by someone in their families. People had so many things, so many challenges. I knew it, that these students could barely get a C in high school. I couldn't help but think that these students were prevented from a college education only because they had unimpressive test scores. Yale and Harvard want the A's, UConn wants the B's, and then no one wants the students with a D average. And so it turns out that I didn't have to go very far to find a high school where these students existed, and I would find my center of gravity. So I went to Hartford. I called the advisor, the head of advisement actually, and I said to him I wanted to meet with him. When I got there, he was actually shaking because he didn't know why a president of a university wanted to meet with him. I didn't meet with his supervisor, and I broke all protocol. I didn't meet with the superintendent of school. I didn't meet with the school principal. I just got my way into the high school. They thought I was a parent, and I met with him. He said, "What do you want?" He was in disbelief. And I asked him the following question. If I asked you to identify students who live in an apartment with 12 other people because they're immigrants, students whose fathers are in jail because they committed a violent crime, mothers who are on drugs and are addicts, women who are being violated in different ways, if you have those students here and you see light in their eyes and potential, could you identify them for me? And without blinking, he said yes. He said, "Of course I can." The student body of Hartford Public High School was approximately 2/3 Latino and 1/3 Black, and the school maintained a college graduation rate of 15%, not 50, 15%. Students at Hartford Public were suffering from the typical structural causes of poverty that you would expect to impact academic performance. And we forget that as scholars and academics, that it's not that they're stupid or that they don't want to work. It's the conditions in which they find themselves in that they cannot get out of, and that affects their performance. And nothing in their life seems stable, supportive, or conducive to learning. One day I left my office, I met with them, I talked to Quinebaug Valley Community College, and in doing so, I asked the president then of the community college, if I had some students who were not admissible to Eastern, could you take them at Quinebaug for the first semester? And then once they finished their remediation and the developmental work, I would admit them at Eastern. Could we do this together? And she, without blinking, like the academic advisor said, "Of course we can. We would be so happy to have those students." And so I knew they were thinking, why would a university president want to talk to us? That's what people always thought. And so it was incredibly important to me that I found this support at the high school and at the community college. And so thanks to a grant that I got from a local foundation, the dual enrollment program was formed. And as I said, they went first to the community college for that first semester, but lived on our campus. So they would take a shower in the morning and go to courses there, but they participated in all the extracurriculars at Eastern, and nobody knew that they were not Eastern students, and they took one course in philosophy as non-matriculated students. Guidance counselors recommended students into the pilot program. None of them were accepted into a 4-year college. In their first semester student cohort, they took the courses that I described in remediation and developmental courses, and thus was created a program of stability. They received all the benefits of the academic support center that I just described, and volunteers self-identified to act as informal mentors to the students. Hundreds of students have gone through the program, and the graduation rates are more than double the Hartford Public average. Graduates have gone on to earn master's degree, doctorates, and they have earned many, many, many prestigious awards. These were the students who were written off by nearly everyone, but because of one idea that had never been thought of before, something that had never been done before, their lives will be forever changed. That idea came to me that I had to reach out to in order to fix the problem. The problem was not going to come to Eastern and get fixed by itself. And so this idea of reaching out into the community and being proactive and then having established the support systems for them, because if I had brought them without the support system, they would have failed out, was a win-win for everybody. In 2016, I was contacted by, actually it was before 2016 when I was contacted by Education Trust, and I got an email that I thought was spam. In those days, you called it spam. And they said that Eastern ranked number 1 in the retention and graduation rates of Hispanic students and Black students. And I said, that can't be. So I asked our IT people to verify the email, and I also asked people to verify the source of the email, and everything was verified. They said, it's true, Elsa. This does come from Education Trust, which is a big national research arm. What I had forgotten was that I had participated in a study, in a survey, a year before I got this email. Well, when I called the head of Education Trust and I asked him, he said, yes, Elsa, you ranked number 1. I had no idea that all of the support that I described to you had impacted the students of color in ways that had given us national prominence. I had no idea that that would be the effect. And so this idea of having a support system that was comprehensive, deep, and impacted the culture and transformed the culture had yielded this wonderful result. In 2016, I was contacted by Donald Graham. And Donald Graham is the former publisher of the Washington Post, and he's, of course, the son of the Graham family and an heir to the Graham fortune. He was an investor in Google, made a ton of money, and instead of leaving it to his children, he created the Dream.us nonprofit organization to give scholarships to students who were DACA students and were locked out of their states. So lockout states are states in which students are not allowed to study and go to college in their state. So those are like Mississippi, Missouri. There are a lot of lockout states in this country. So he would only give the scholarship to students who were from lockout states, and he selected 2 universities in the country that they could attend. He was not going to let them go anywhere they wanted. He was paying a full ride. He writes me a check for every student, tuition, room and board, all fees. He pays it up front at the beginning of the year. And he has done this for the last 5 years. The DACA students come, they've gone into medical school, law school. They're very, very successful students. They're all from the top of their class, and they're wonderful, wonderful students. As you know, they are students who have struggled because their families are also immigrant families and they are in marginal conditions. But these students are smart. I would never have gotten that financial reward of bringing all the DACA students to Eastern if it hadn't been from that original idea, which is build a system to support students, build a system so they'll graduate. And that's what Don Graham had heard about, that we were committed to student success and that we were committed to them graduating. And he wanted the DACA students to be in a loving environment and in a culture that supported them. We had evidence of that, as I mentioned to you earlier, about the success of all students of color on campus. Since the inception, hundreds of students from 17 states have come. Their GPAs are very high, 3.5. They have a retention rate of 98%. They're so smart and so capable. So that is the story of students who enrolled at Eastern in the dual enrollment program, and then students who enrolled at Eastern who were at the other end of the spectrum, very successful, but had no opportunity. 2 conditions that are different. Both had no opportunity. That was what they had in common. And so we became the home of people with little opportunity. So what happens 16 years later, almost 17? I can't say that we've achieved complete success, but I do know this. We no longer get criticisms in the NESE survey about tutoring, advisement, or support services. They say it's wonderful at Eastern. They get all of these services, so that makes me smile. I've heard stories from students who are quite clear in attributing their success at Eastern to the quality of the academic support. Of course, I always give them credit for taking advantage of it because they're good students, since it can be difficult at any age to admit we might actually need help. While we didn't achieve complete success with respect to getting more students to complete the journey from freshman move-in day to commencement, because I always want 100%, we did do very, very well at Eastern. Today, our overall retention rate is 83%, and I'm very proud of that. For students who come in through the opportunity programs in the summer, like the program that I described, it's 89% retention rate, and that's of this semester. And they go on to become doctors, bankers, lawyers, teachers, social workers, writers, accountants, and they're American citizens, except for the DACA students who want to become American citizens. I also discovered something else. While we change a culture, we create a more equitable campus, a learning environment in which all students, especially students of color, could thrive. Consider these outcomes. Students of color comprised about 14% when I took this job. Today, it's almost 30% of our student population. In 2005, 74% of students of color were retained. And this fall, as I mentioned, it's 89% of students of color are retained. The four-year graduation rate, students of color, it's almost 30%. At 2018, it was almost 40%. So the six-year graduation rate for students of color, about 50%. These percentages were so examined and so torn apart so we could find where our strengths and weaknesses are. And so they represent what I believe is critically important, that the realm of academic research will finally embrace equity in both theory and practice when there are more advanced degree candidates of color who are conducting that research. But we have to recognize that in order to have more candidates of color pursuing advanced degrees and conducting academic research like all of you, we need to make sure we offer that stable, supportive environment at the beginning of a college experience so they can thrive. No matter what the roles we play, whether faculty are working with students, the bookstore personnel is working with students, administrative units are working with students, housekeeping see our students, ITS see our students. It's everybody's responsibility on campus to make sure that they reach out to the students and touch their lives. So many years ago, when I was a young person, and close your eyes and imagine this, a girl with long black hair, with a blue dress that looked like it belonged to her mother, with plastic black shoes because she didn't have money for leather shoes, walks to campus for the first time from a very poor Hispanic large family. There at orientation, I looked around and I said, I don't belong here because everybody looks so different than me. I took a deep breath, went home and cried and said, I don't want to go to college. But I was the oldest. My father was really, really proud that I was going to college. And he asked me, how did it go? He was so happy that I had gone to orientation. And I took the bus back home because I didn't want to go back. But then he said, I had to go back. I should try again. And I did. I went to my English class one morning, and the students were amazing. They could analyze literature in ways that I had no way of analyzing. And they could speak about this book and that character and this character and this plot and that plot. And they were analytical at a very high level. And I cried that night after my first class and said, I don't belong there. So two thoughts came into my mind within a short period of time of not belonging, of not wanting to be there. I went to class again, and Dr. McGee, who was my English teacher, had a habit of calling roll. I don't know if some of you do that in your classes. I did it because I modeled what he did. So he would say, Sheila Brown, Lisa Smith, Michael Stenko, Elsa Maria Nunez. What a beautiful name. And the first time he said that, I said, oh, I don't like that. The next day he would say, Lisa Smith, Michael Stenko, Alicia Brown, Elsa Maria Nunez. What a beautiful name. You know, by the third time I said, I do have a beautiful name. That's just so beautiful. It's more beautiful than Alicia Brown. And I just said, I love my name. It was the first time I had heard my name spoken. Dr. McGee was a full professor of English. He was a disabled World War II veteran, and he sat in a wheelchair. He gave me my first paper back, full of red marks. And at the bottom, he said, I want to see you in class. That's the third time I said, I don't belong here. I said, I'll go to the office because I do what I'm told. I come from a culture where authority is always at the head and you obey authority. And when I went to his office, I was very reluctant. And I said, after this meeting, I'll go home. I'll find a way home and never come back. When I went to his office, he said, Elsa, he said, I'm so glad you came. He said, you have some really good ideas, but your writing is very weak. He said, what I will do is ask you to come into my office every time that I have office hours. You're going to sit across from me over there, and I have work to do. And as you revise your essays, you're going to show me your revisions. And so for an entire semester, Dr. McGee read my essays in his office while I was revising them. So it was supplemental instruction, basically the model on a one-to-one level. He never made me feel inadequate. He never diminished me. He never talked about me being poor or me being minority. He never said anything like that. All he said is, you have good ideas. That's what I heard first. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, we're just going to work on your writing. So at the end of the course, I got a B. It's an honorable B. I'm so proud of that B because I worked so hard for that B. And he gave me the love, the compassion, and care to earn that B. So when you work in an institution like all of us do, and you bring people together like your institutions do in a team, and everybody starts working for the benefit of that one girl who doesn't feel like she belongs, and at the end of the day, she stays and graduates and becomes a college president, there's a story there, not my success, but the success about caring, supporting, and being there. So this idea of creating something from scratch, an idea, all of you have done that, and you will continue to do that for your institutions. You want the best major for your students. You want the best retention rate for your students. You want the best dormitory experience for you. Whatever the idea is, you can achieve it. Put the team together, if it's not there together, who can live every day in a culture that will make that achievable. An idea that's never been thought of before can be accomplished because people who care make it happen. Dr. McGee was the biggest blessing in my life, and I owe him everything that I have today. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for listening.